What's up, BookTube? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm wrapping up my August reading month. So August was a pretty good month overall. Not my best, but not my worst either. I read a total of 5 books, which worked out to 2,303 pages overall. I read 1 romance, 1 fantasy, 2 sci-fi, and 1 paranormal horror-ish type story. For where I sourced these books, 2 of them were from my library, 1 was from Scribd, and 2 of them I already owned. And for the format, 2 of them were ebooks, 1 of them was an audiobook, and 2 were physical print copies. And the demographic breakdown, 4 of these books were for a YA audience, and 1 of them was for an adult audience. And for my star rating breakdown, I read 1 2-star, 2 3-stars, 1 4-star, and 1 5-star book. Okay, so now that these stats are out of the way, let's get on to the reviews. Starting with Boyfriend Material by Alexis. This was the first book that I read this month. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I loved this one. It was so messy and adorable. I absolutely adored it. It's a queer contemporary adult romance, so obviously I'm gonna like it. This one takes place in the UK and it follows a guy who has been famous for most of his life because both of his parents were rock stars. And as a result, every mistake and bad decision that he's ever made has been plastered all over the paper, and it's given him a pretty bad reputation, which has started to affect his work life. So he basically gets threatened to be fired if he doesn't clean up his act, and so he decides to get a fake boyfriend who is normal and nice to help fix his image. This is when Luke meets Oliver, who is a barrister. He's an ethical vegetarian, and he's just all around the perfect image of a nice guy. And he just happens to be in need of a fake boyfriend as well to bring as a date to a big family gathering that he's having soon. So the 2 of them strike up a deal to be fake boyfriends just until both their events have passed, and then they can go on their separate ways. But given that it's a romance, they of course end up falling in love, and the road to that is just an absolute mess, and I loved every second of it. Luke is just such an anxiety-ridden person. He's very insecure. He has a lot of emotional trauma that he hasn't dealt with before, and he also is dealing with some personal life issues with his family, and now this new relationship with a guy who he should not like, but he does. The 2 are polar opposites, but for some reason they just work really well together, and this throws both Luke and Oliver for a loop as they try and figure out why they're actually attracted to each other and how to possibly make things work between them. This was a really sweet story. I loved it. I especially love Luke and how absolutely messy he is. I know I keep saying that he's messy, but I cannot explain to you just how much of a mess this boy is. I believe he'd only had 1 solid relationship before, and that ended so poorly in a way that really damaged him emotionally, and he's just now trying to figure that out 5 years later. He spent the last 5 years living in a really depressed state. He's distanced himself from his friends. He's let his health and his cleanliness and his hygiene just completely go, and he's now meeting Oliver, who is the complete opposite. He's a total neat freak, control freak. He needs things to be neat and tidy, and they're just complete opposites, but they learn from each other. Luke learns how to get his shit together basically, and Oliver learns how to kind of let go a little bit and speak up for himself and be a bit messy. Oliver is so focused on being perfect all the time, and Luke really helps him learn how to let go of that control a little bit. So they both learned from each other and gained a lot of really important life lessons from each other, and I thought it was so well done. I really enjoyed this book, and I gave it a 4.5 stars. Next up is Girl Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashardoust. This was such an incredible read. Oh my gosh, this one is a YA fantasy novel inspired by Persian folklore and fairy tales, mythology, all that good stuff that if you know me at all, you know I live and breathe for. I love fairy tales and fairy tale inspired stories, and I especially love reading ones that are inspired by cultures that I don't often read about. This is own voices, it's queer, it's wonderful, and I loved every second of it. This one was without a doubt 5 stars. I was blown away by how beautiful it is. I don't even really know how to explain it because the blurb in the book doesn't really give you that much information. Basically, the blurb tells you that it's about a princess who is born with a curse to be poisonous to the touch. So any living thing that she touches, aside from flowers and stuff, will immediately die. So she spent her life kind of locked away in a tower, the whole typical princess thing, kept away from anyone and everyone her entire life for their own safety. And she's okay with this, but she's not really. She understands, but she wants to have a normal life, and there's a creature captured in their dungeons who can give her answers. But that's really all that the synopsis gives you, and I don't want to give away too much more. It really doesn't tell you where the story is going, and I think it should stay that way. Honestly, like if I were to critique this story at all, it would be that it was pretty predictable. Like nothing really took me by surprise. It does follow a pretty typical fairy tale storyline, which for me, that's not a problem. I love fairy tales, so I was just so pleased with this entire story. It was so beautifully done, and like, sure, yeah, there weren't like crazy wild plot twists at every turn, but I still loved absolutely everything about it. It was just stunning. It was so beautiful, and I really enjoyed all of the Persian mythology that was woven into the story, like, very seamlessly. And I really love that at the end of the book the author included a section where she explains where all the inspirations came from and the different stories and myths and everything that she drew from. It was really fascinating to hear the inspirations behind it and like the actual stories and the bits of language and everything that was woven into the story. I thought it was so beautiful, so I highly recommend this one, and it was a glowing 5 stars for me. After that, I read On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. This is a YA sci-fi graphic novel, which is also queer. I'm seeing a theme so far. Apparently the first half of my month was just the gayest thing ever. That was not intentional, but I'm happy about it. So basically, this book is about a girl who takes a job on a spaceship where they go around the galaxy and repair old buildings that have fallen apart, and they basically just preserve history. It's a really cool job, and the people on the ship are so wonderful. They're this beautiful found family that our main character Mia becomes part of very quickly. The story is set in a dual timeline, so there's the present day, and then it also flashes back to the past when Mia was, I think she was 15 or 14, and she was getting to know this new girl at her school, and they were slowly falling in love. But then something happens and her girlfriend disappears for reasons that I won't say, obviously, and Mia has spent the last 5 years wondering where she's gone and if she'll ever see her again. So Mia ends up enlisting the help of her crew / now family, and they agree to help her find her now ex-girlfriend. So they travel across the galaxy trying to find this girl just so Mia can at least say goodbye properly. She just wants closure, basically. They weren't able to say goodbye, again, reasons that I won't say because of spoilers, but she just wants the chance to actually be able to say goodbye to her girlfriend and be able to move on. I unfortunately wasn't a huge fan of this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. Honestly, the majority of that rating was because of the art and the world, which were phenomenal. But I'll start with the negatives first. I just found the plot to be really odd. I couldn't really buy into this romance because, like, Mia and her girlfriend, they dated for like literally a year, not even, when they were 14 years old, and it's been 5 years. So I just have a hard time believing that, like, Mia is still that attached to her after all this time, because I think back to people that I knew when I was 14, and I don't give a damn about them, to be honest. So I just have a hard time kind of believing that she would go to all these lengths, like literally go and risk her life and the lives of her entire family to go find this girl who she hasn't seen in so long and barely even knew. Like, you kind of get to know somebody pretty well in the course of a year, but like, it's not like they were married, you know, like they were just dating at a very young age. So I just had a hard time with the whole romance aspect of it. It seemed like too big of a grand gesture, given that it wasn't that serious of a relationship, in my opinion at least. So that just felt really odd to me. And then the characters, I didn't think were that well developed. I enjoyed the characters, there was nothing wrong with them, but most of them didn't really capture my attention. The one character who I did love was Elle, who shockingly is the non-binary character, so of course I loved them. But Elle is fantastic and I adored them so much. But otherwise, I liked the characters as a group. We all know that I love a found family, and this one was a very good example of a found family that I just absolutely adored. So them as a unit, fantastic. Individually, kind of boring, so I wasn't that big on it. However, the world and the art were so good. Oh my gosh, it was so visually stunning. The art is incredible and the world is so unique and really interesting. I would gladly read a whole book just exploring the world. So I wish that I had liked this one better, but I at least got to look at this beautiful masterpiece of a world for a couple of hours, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But overall, 3.5 stars for me. Second from last is Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is the third book in the Diviners series. In this installment, our diviners are still just trying to figure out the mystery of the man in the stovepipe hat and trying to save New York before the ghosts take over and just kill everybody. And at this time, they're taken to an asylum where shit gets messy, and but unfortunately, again, I didn't really enjoy this book. Sad about it, but what can you do? I ended up giving it a 3 stars. This is probably my least favorite book in the series so far. I said during my vlog for Tome Topple that I like this one better than the first book, but actually I don't think I do. I think I liked the first book a little bit better in certain aspects, or like maybe they're tied. They're probably tied, but book 2 is still like by far the best one. But I am definitely in the minority for this. This has an extremely high rating on Goodreads, so I am definitely one of the few who didn't really enjoy it. I don't know what is wrong with me, but whatever. I also forgot to mention that I did do a readathon this month, which was Tome Topple. So I read this book plus On a Sunbeam for Tome Topple. I didn't really do the prompts, but the readathon did occur. So, but yeah, I'm sad that I didn't love this book as much as I was hoping to, because like based on the blurb, I thought that I would love it. A super creepy asylum sounded like it would be right up my alley, but the asylum wasn't really a big part of it. Like they were done with the asylum by like literally halfway through the book, and given how large this book is, that is a lot of pages of no asylum. So this book ended up not being what I thought it was going to be, and I just wasn't vibing with it. Also, the romance got way too heavy. Everybody is having romance problems. There's a love triangle that just doesn't make any sense. And yeah, I just really didn't vibe with this one. I think it would have been better if the romance wasn't so prevalent. I don't mind a bit of romance, but like, oh my god, it seemed like the romance was more important than the literal end of the world that is coming for these teenagers. So yeah, I don't care for that. That's always been a huge issue that I've had with YA, is that they often do that, where like these kids are trying to save the world. Oh, but like my boyfriend though, he's so much more important. Like, fuck off. I don't care. Like, and that's not just me being a cynical adult. I thought the same thing when I was their own age. So that's just me not liking overly dramatic romance in my novels. But what can you do? And on the romance note, it was also weirdly sexual too, given that like these are still teenagers. It got weird. There were some weird moments, like literally somebody licking somebody's finger and calling himself a naughty boy. Like, what the fuck? It was so weird. Like, I don't know why that was necessary. I don't know why she thought that was a good idea to put in there, or like really any of it, but I did not enjoy it at all. There were also quite a few trigger warnings that I was not expecting. I haven't seen anybody talking about the trigger warnings for this series, but they seemed especially prevalent in this book. There was, for example, attempted rape that was pretty graphically described, and given the setting of the book, the racism and sexism, not surprising, but still very prevalent. There was the implied molestation of a child, yeah, as well as very graphically described like flashbacks of sexual assault and domestic abuse. So a lot of trigger warnings that I wasn't expecting, and I wish that I had known them before. So hopefully somebody watching, there are your trigger warnings that I don't see anybody talking about. I'm sure they do, I just haven't seen them. But yeah, so not my favorite. I wish that I liked it more, but it could have been worse. I gave it 3 stars. Not bad, but also not very good either. So. And then last and definitely least was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the new prequel to The Hunger Games. I didn't like it. I'm definitely not alone in my thought that this book sucked. It was just straight up not good, and I'm very sad about it. It just wasn't interesting, and like it didn't add much as a prequel. Like we got to see some bits of how the games were developed, and there were a few things that like tied it to the original trilogy, but like nothing that was really significant. Like it tied in a few of the songs that Katniss sang, and it explained how the whole betting and sponsorships worked for tributes, but like that's really it. It didn't really give you a background on how the Hunger Games came to be. Like it was there a little bit, but like nothing that we didn't already know from the first trilogy. So I it just didn't feel necessary at all. And it also didn't give us a whole lot on President Snow background either. I was expecting him to be kind of a good guy at the beginning, and then like something happened and that explains why he turns into this horrible monster, but like he's basically the same person the entire time. He's always been a dick, and so I'm like, why was this necessary then if he's gonna be the same person the entire time? And also that like it was very wishy-washy too. Like I couldn't figure out if I was supposed to root for him in the beginning before his like downfall, or if I was supposed to hate him the whole time. I couldn't tell. She was kind of going back and forth with that the entire time. Sometimes it would seem like you're supposed to root for him, you're supposed to feel bad for him, or you're supposed to be like, oh, he's kind of a good guy. And then other times it seemed like he thought that he was a good person, but we the reader knew that he wasn't. So it was back and forth between those two notions all the time, and I couldn't figure out what Suzanne Collins actually wanted us to think, or like what she was going for. It wasn't clear enough for me. And then just the plot was absolute bullshit in my opinion. It was not good. This is mostly just a romance, to be honest. Like the majority of the book is just Coriolanus falling in love and then shit happening. Like that's all it was, really. Like the games were there, you got to see a little bit about his childhood, but like mostly it was just about the romance and him constantly thinking about his new girlfriend, which I do not like the romance in this. I think it's really gross. That kind of power imbalance should never be present in a relationship. I would go so far as to call that romance like Stockholm syndrome on her part, or like a similar kind of thing, because like what the fuck, it was I'm not mad that I read it, but I'm also not glad that I did. I do think there's going to be more prequels just based on how this ended. I have a feeling that there will be more, and I don't want there to be, but I'm obviously still gonna keep reading them because I'm trash, but I don't want there to be more. So and yeah, it was just predictable and just not very well thought out. She had good ideas, but not good execution whatsoever. I feel like the most important bits were skipped over and the most boring ones were described in excruciating detail. So I wasn't thrilled, but yeah, so 2.5 stars for me. And that does it for my August reading month. Pretty good month, like I said before, so I'm happy with what I read this month. But that'll do it for today. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're all having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye!